It's Hump Day. You know what that means. Time for the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with Diana Pardee, SCWA's Tech Wizard and Birthday Girl. Every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., the Southern California Writers Association welcomes a new author to come and talk about their books and share their work. This morning, we are honored to have Nancy Cole Silverman. Nancy is a graduate of Arizona State University with a degree in mass communications. She's also enjoyed a long and successful career in radio before turning to print journalism and later to fiction. She was one of the first female on-air television reporters in her hometown of Phoenix. I was born in Tucson, so there we go. After moving to LA in the late 1970s, she turned to the business side of broadcasting, becoming one of the top advertising sales executives in the market. After stints at KNX, oh my gosh, I'm not going to read all these wonderful K words here, but different radio stations, she was appointed general manager at KMPC, making her one of only 2 female managers in America's second largest radio market. Wow. Nancy is a full-time author. She writes both the Carol Childs and Mystery Dawn series, numerous short stories, and is currently at work on a piece of historical fiction. Okay, there's a detour, Nancy. Well, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, you write cozy mystery, soft boil mystery, and now you're also currently working on historical fiction. How did you, let's start with how you got to writing fiction from writing truth and nonfiction in journalism. How did you bridge that?
Well, that's a good question. I think over the years, sitting in a newsroom and at KNX and KFWB and being on the sales side, boy, I would see stories walk through that newsroom all the time. And later in my career, I was at KABC, talk radio. And I was in the newsroom, we were covering the O.J. Simpson trial. And I was in the studio one afternoon when the on-air host put the caller who had called in on hold. And the caller said to the host, well, I'm going to tell you something I wouldn't tell the police. And I thought, whoa, that's an idea. So like all writers, I had a bucket of things I wanted to do one day, my bucket list, and one of them was write mysteries and fiction. And so when I retired from radio, I was going through my file system and I found this and I thought, you know what, that's the crux for my first series, which was the Carol Childs mysteries, which began it's a current day series about a female investigative reporter who was brand new, who's gotten her opportunity and kind of taking my own experiences, having jumped the sides of the desk and gone from the advertising side and with the blessings of the general manager to the news department, who does not want her absolutely at all. She's nearly 35, 40 years old, and the news director is a young 21-year-old upstart who looks at her as the world's oldest cub reporter and thinks, where can I get rid of this woman? I don't want her working for me. What does she know? It's not going to be good for me. And therein starts the mystery with the Carol Childs mysteries, inspired by a real newsroom event and with fictitious characters that have conflict between them. So that was the beginning and a start. And it was fun, and I've had a lot of fun with that series.
So how many books are in that series, Nancy?
That series has 5 books in it right now. I am on hiatus of that series right now because as I was going to begin the 6th in that series, a character jumped off the pages from that series named Misty Dawn. And you have to be inspired when you sit down to write. And stories pick the writer. I've always felt that versus the writer picking the story. And I had full intentions of sitting down and writing about a newsroom that was under siege with an outside group that was going to blow up a bomb or something. And I had it all worked out in my mind and I couldn't write it. But what I could write is Misty Dawn, who had been a kind of a minor character, a former Hollywood psychic to the stars, a 70-plus-year-old woman who had come to California selling whatever you might want to sell and not talk about back in the 60s. Oh. Out of the back of her painted VW Volkswagen. She was a hippie from the way back when. And her character just grew on the page more than it actually had in the books. and I couldn't get rid of her. And so I thought, well, I'll just sit down and jot a few ideas, and this will go back to my file where I'll pull it out later. And every time I sat down, there she was on the page, and her voice was so strong in my ear, I couldn't leave her alone. So finally I said, fine, Misty, I will write your story.
All right already, here we go.
Yeah, all right already, leave me alone. And so I sat down and I realized that she was tired of hanging around with Carol. She wanted a place of her own, and she's moved into an old cottage, craftsman cottage, that a client of hers has said, you need to live here because you've been house sitting. And over the years, Misty, being a tender heart, hadn't done well. As you know, we see a lot of senior citizens that haven't put enough money aside, and it's expensive. And so this client of hers takes her under her belt and says, you know, my brother died. He had a sudden stroke, died. He used to be a set designer, has this old craftsman home. It's full of lots of old movie memorabilia and things from stages that he had set. And he's not there. I don't know what to do with it. The market's under the water. Why don't you go live there? So Misty thinks, well, you know, you can't turn down an offer like that. But when she moves in, he's still there. He hasn't passed. He's what we call a shade. Shade is a being that's stuck between two worlds, both the here and the hereafter. And Misty, being a psychic, is very familiar with this type of being, because when they're stuck like this, it's because they need help. And so she goes about her day to day and realizes he doesn't want her in the house. She takes her bath upstairs and just dramatically leaves her little bra on the shower head and so forth, only to come down the next morning to find her purse, her bra, her car keys on the kitchen table with every indication indicating go, leave. And so they meet, and she says, you know what, I don't have to leave. You're just not here. And he goes, well, what do you mean? And she explains to him he's dead. And he says, well, if you're a psychic, fix it. You know, and of course she can't fix it. And she says, but I can help you move on, should you decide to help me. And so it's the story. There's a trilogy there. And I wrote this particularly as a trilogy because it's meeting Wilson Thorne, who is the spirit, Wilson's growth and maturation, and eventually what happens to their relationships. Each book deals with a different mystery that helps him grow. And it's been a delight to write that series. I had a great fun doing it.
So there are not a lot of mysteries out there with 70-year-old protagonists out there. What made you decide to do that? I mean, I know you heard her voice, but there's a commercial aspect to that. What do you think is the appeal of a protagonist like that?
I think because they can't be so physical, you're not going to have a protagonist that can get into altercations. Age is wisdom. You sacrifice strength as you gain wisdom. And so Misty, who might be considered a psychic to some, considers herself an intuitive. And she also is very aware of how she can deal with the world around her without being physical. She's simply quite much smarter because experience led her that way. She also is hampered a little bit by a lot of physicality things. You know, she's got arthritis quite badly. She's got a kind of an irregular heartbeat, but she's very therapeutic in her approach, a naturalist. She believes in all natural products, and she has a garden outside her gate. And we get to know a lot about those things that strengthen her because of her hobbies and so forth.
Great. I have to say that I think that does have an appeal. And I know that you have a lot of fans, and we're talking about before we were talking about genres, and we were talking about the Carol books being soft-boiled and the Misty books being more cozy. Do you want to talk about the difference a little bit so readers know what they're getting into when they buy the different stories?
Okay, that sounds good. Not that all cozies are fantasy, but I think they do well with kind of things that aren't necessarily hard-boiled and hard lines of being realistic. But Misty is definitely more of almost a paranormal fantasy. There is nothing hard that happens on the page. There's no murders that you see on the page. There's certainly no language. And it deals with the ability to be on this side of the veil and the other side of the veil in a very nice, gentle way. there's a real love affair that develops between she and Wilson, her shade, which does not start out that way at all. So you have a growth. And one of the things when I sit down and try to write a series, and I really kind of in my own mind will say this is going to be a trilogy, and I think for a paranormal a trilogy, because anything in threes is trilogy, works out really well, was to kind of see where Wilson's growth would be and how their relationship would change. One of the ways I did that was that Misty has a cat. Of course, she's a psychic. She's a woman. It's a cozy. There's a cat, right? So she has a cat, and Wilson, all of his life, has been terribly allergic to cats. So when Misty first enters the old craftsman cottage where she's going to stay, she's got her cat under her arm, and you know, a bunch of bundles, and she immediately falls on the floor. This cat campers out under the stairs, and there's a achoo, which she says, aha, she knows the spirit is here. And so that kind of begins. Toward the end of the series, I'll give you a little spoiler alert, Wilson is cuddling the cat. So we can see the growth. We can see, you know, he's embraced it, and he's no longer has these physical shortcomings that he had in life in the beyond. He's much more full-rounded. As for the difference, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I love the setup and the conflict and the future conflict, the relationship. There's conflict on all levels, which,
well, you have to have that. You have to build in conflict. You know, when you introduce your characters, and really from page one, at least for me, I want to know who I'm dealing with and what they want and what they can't have. And you know, if everything is too perfect, it's like a news story. It doesn't make the news. It's when things, and I learned that from a newsroom, you know, when things are not right, that's when they make the news. If it's, gee, it's a wonderful day, it's going to be 75, it's going to be glorious, there's going to be no traffic jams, there's going to be no weather, everything is great, guys, go about, that's just not going to make the news. So you've got to have on that first page something that's going to grab your reader. And they're going to grab your reader by telling them something about your character and what they can't have and the conflict they've got with their, you know, with the other characters on the page. As for the Carol Child series, that is a soft-boiled series. Because I came from news, there's certainly no words in it and everything happens off the page, similar to a cozy and yet much more realistic in what's happening. Each of them deals with a murder and event in each book. Each book is its own murder and event. Carol's first deals with the sudden death of a young actress. Misty's first book deals with a drowning in a pool at an actress's home that just come and asked for a reading, and they go back to the house and suddenly there's a body there. Whoa. So you want to get that right out front. And it's like any new series you watch on TV. Within that first series, you've got to get all your characters introduced. You've got to get the problems set up front, and you really want to do as much as you can do with your first chapter, and really on your first couple of pages in any book you're going to put. At least in my opinion, what I've done, I like to grab my reader right away.
Well, I think that everybody has should have some sense of what they're getting into when they buy a book written by Nancy Cole Silverman, at least a mystery. I hope you'll come back and talk about your next project, which is a historical fiction, but we'll talk about that later. Where can people buy your books, Nancy?
You can go into any bookstore and ask for them if they're not there, or you can go online, any of the major retailers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and so forth, and buy them both in ebook, softback, and paper and hardback. And I think I'm really pleased to be here today. Thanks so much.
Well, we're going to see you again, and we appreciate you being here. Best of luck on your upcoming project. Again, we'll come back. Hopefully you'll come back and talk about that when we get a little closer to publication, right?
I will. You won't have to ask twice.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully everyone enjoyed this short conversation with Nancy as much as I did. You can, if you didn't, if you'd like to share it, you can share the video with people on Facebook, or you can go to SCWA Writers Online, our YouTube channel, and share it there. So hopefully we will see you next week when we bring another exciting new author to the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. Until then, stay safe and keep reading. See you.
Bye. Thanks.